Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Presidential Forum for the 105th AMS Annual Meeting. I'm Anjali Bamzai, and I'm the AMS President for the next 2 or 3 hours, that is. A special welcome to the Honorable Jason Williams, District Attorney, Orleans Parish, and his wife, Dr. Liz Marcel Williams, and the Honorable Don Burkett, District Attorney, Sabine Parish, Many, Louisiana. Firstly, I want to say we at the AMS annual meeting stand with the people of New Orleans in remembering the victims of the January 1 attack. I request we all stand up and take a moment of silence in memory of those who lost their lives that day. Thank you. The theme of this year's meeting is Towards a Thriving Planet, Charting the Course Across Scales. On a human system level, the theme reminds us of the crucial role each of us as individuals play in shaping the course towards a thriving planet. The aggregate of our actions across the spectrum enable a thriving planet. Today's Presidential Forum aims to give broad attention to issues that will be discussed in more detail during individual presidential sessions held throughout the week and in the context of science, applications, and services that members of the AMS undertake, be it in academia, government, private sector, or in the communities they might serve. So just a minute, I wanted to describe the presidential sessions following last year's model, and imitation is the best form of flattery. Brad ran a very successful presidential session last year. I decided to just follow it. And we have 12 presidential sessions scheduled concurrently mid-morning, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Each of them addresses broad topics across the 45 conferences and symposia. Several have been jointly developed across the symposia and conferences. I want to take a moment to thank the subcommittee chair, Pat Haar, and his team. They worked tirelessly during the course of the year. At this point, I would like to thank our sponsors of this year's presidential session, Peraton Civil Space, and I invite Mark Jashan from Peraton to say a few words of welcome.
All right, thank you, Anjali. Peraton, which provides operational, scientific, and engineering support to NASA and NOAA, is extremely grateful to serve as a sponsor of this event and work with our customers and partners in this community. It's a tremendous honor and a privilege to stand before you today as we kick off the AMS 2025 annual meeting and join this distinguished body of scientists, researchers, policymakers, and thought leaders. Today's forum, Physical, Social, Cultural, and Economic Impacts, the Gulf Coast as a Microcosm of Global Change, is a compelling topic that invokes the need to understand the broader implications of environmental change and the unique ecosystem of this region and the breadth of challenges that can be extended worldwide. The panel discussion, moderated by Dr. Rebecca Morse of the National Science Foundation Center for Atmospheric Research, will focus on the importance of scientific advances, policy development, and public engagement that will enable both local and global ecosystems to better predict, prevent, and foster proactive global citizenship, as well as promote sustainable infrastructure and strategies to address the rapidly evolving microcosm. As we reflect on this theme, it reminds us that ensuring the health and resilience of our planet requires a multifaceted approach. From monitoring global data to making localized, actionable decisions, the ability to chart a course across scales is both a challenge and an opportunity, one that Peraton and our mission partners across the federal and local governments are deeply committed to addressing. The American Meteorological Society community plays a vital role in this endeavor. Together, we are advancing the science that informs policy, drives innovative solutions, and inspires the next generation of leaders. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and thank you for your tireless efforts in the pursuit of a more resilient and sustainable world. I very much look forward to a week of inspiration, discovery, and progress. And thank you again, Anjali.
So as Mark mentioned, the topic of the Presidential Forum is Physical, Social, Cultural, and Economic Impacts, Gulf Coast as a Microcosm of Global Change. We are fortunate to have 4 eminent panelists sharing their insights and expertise. And the moderator is Dr. Rebecca Morse from NSEF NCAR. So without further ado, I invite the panelists and Rebecca.
So thank you to Anjali, Pat Haar, and the organizing committee and the AMS for arranging this panel and for inviting me to moderate. We have a phenomenal set of panelists today with complementary expertise related to our topic. I'm very much looking forward to hearing their perspectives and your questions, which we'll address after the introductory remarks by each panelist. Please use the Slido to ask questions and upvote others' questions that you are interested in hearing more about at any time during the session. So our first panelist is Dr. Virginia Burkett. She is the Chief Scientist for Climate and Land Use Change at the United States Geological Survey. She has a PhD in forestry and has published research on a variety of topics related to wetlands, global change, and low-lying coastal systems. During the course of her career, she has been appointed to numerous committees and boards at the national and international levels. Highlights include serving as a member of the Louisiana Governor's Climate Initiatives Task Force, on the U.S. Climate Security Advisory Committee, and as U.S. delegate to the Intergovernmental Group on Earth Observations. So welcome, Dr. Burkett.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Anjali, and the AMS for inviting me to speak. Anjali and I have worked together for many years, maybe we said 25 maybe, on beginning on climate change and global change topics. Climate scenarios and their use. That was one of my early papers with Anjali's team, the Gulf Coast Transportation Impact Assessment, and more recently on the National Academies committees and with the intelligence community on climate change and national security. The selection of the theme for this presidential forum is certainly fitting as the AMS convenes here in NOLA. My role on this distinguished panel is to provide you with an orientation of sorts on the drivers of change that make this region represent a microcosm of vulnerabilities that are brought about by global change, and particularly in low-lying coast and megadeltas. So, oh, okay, good. There's a screen here I can use. Okay, so this is my first slide. I've got about 12 slides, 10 slides. This slide is an image collected by NASA MODIS, the Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer, at a resolution of 250 meters. You can see the Lake Pontchartrain. I don't have a pointer, but Lake Pontchartrain has chlorophyll in it. You can see the sediment plume of the Mississippi River and where it dumps all of that fresh water and sediment right at the edge of the continental shelf. You can see the Barataria Basin. Well, you can see New Orleans. Gosh, I wish I had a pointer. So you see the city of New Orleans right below Lake Pontchartrain, and the Mississippi River snaking through the marshes to the south of the city. And then you can see all these, looks like dark areas. Those are the estuaries that produce some of the nation's most abundant crops of shrimp and oysters and finfish. And a lot of that is due to the productivity of these marshes. This particular image was taken in February 2018 when there was big deluge in the Midwest that brought rising waters, floodwaters, from the to the Mississippi River, and the major distributary is the Atchafalaya Basin, which you can see is the other muddy area on the left. And a little delta forming in the Atchafalaya Basin, that's the Atchafalaya Delta. and to the west of that, the Wax Lake Outlet, another very smaller delta, and of course the big Mississippi River Delta to the southeast. During this day, there were 350 bays on the spillway on the river to prevent flooding of the city of New Orleans, and about half of them were opened. And you can see how all that sediment is getting into Lake Pontchartrain there, and the remainder is being channeled into the Gulf. If you like to hunt and fish, and you're out there in the Barataria Basin and you look like ships are going way above you, they are. They're on a channel that has been created by human development to protect the area from flooding and to provide navigation. You can see where the levees end there on the lower right-hand side of the slide. And you can see the barrier island chains, the Chandelier Island chain. That's Mississippi up on the upper directly above. So you've got Cat Island, Horn Island, Ship Island, and then Dolphin Island, Alabama, far right. And the Chandelier Island chain, I'm going to show you what has happened to those islands. So that's just for help you to understand the setting. The land in this area is relatively young land. In New Orleans, for example, it's tens of meters thick of deltaic sediment. If you get further down in the Birdfoot Delta, we call it, on the lower right, it's kilometers of sediment thickness in this young sediment, all less than 7,000 years old. When the city of New Orleans was built, it was not built below mean sea level, but you're going to see how that all came about. This is one of the most rapidly changing and vulnerable coastal landscapes on planet Earth, uniquely and intimately linked with weather, climate, and changes in mean sea level. And again, most of this land was created by the Mississippi River and its distributaries over the past 8,000 years during a period of relatively stable sea level. So the river here basically is like a big hose spewing out fresh water and sediment. And when sea level is stable, it builds out onto the continental shelf to a point where it's more the hydraulics are more efficient to shift course. And so the river avulses east and west, flip-flopping back across the coast. And here you can see the oldest ones shown on this slide, 4,600 years ago, the Sally Sipremore Delta, that is where Chafalad Bay is presently. Then it switched to the Teche Delta down by Teche. Then the St. Bernard Delta, number 3 over there, that's when the Chandelier Island material was deposited, but there was a delta there. And through time, when that delta was abandoned, the finer material eroded away and the sandy material remained behind, and that's why we have these barrier island chains. They're erosional features of ancient deltas, but in the geologic sense, pretty new, 5,000 years old or less. So the leveeing of the Mississippi River now prevents the seasonal overbank flooding that would allow new land to form, as it has in the past, and to maintain existing marshes. And it is intimately linked with the level of the ocean, or the sea. So this is an ice core record from Vostok, Antarctica, like that little red dot shown on the lower right, that shows the 4 glacial cycles, interglacial periods, temperature, and is the lower red line. And you can see on the far right a little stable line that is a little blob almost. That's when sea level rise and temperature have been relatively stable compared to the temperature, the time frames shown here. And of course, all these are natural cycles. There's the orbital eccentricity cycle is one of the primary ones. And so those cycles are about 100,000 years just for the eccentricity cycle alone. So everything's stable. Coast as we know them, society as we know it, 10,000 years in this relatively stable period of Earth history. This is where we are in today's time. Actually, yesterday's 424 parts per million volume. And the Holocene epoch was not just a period of relatively stable temperature, but also of global mean sea level. I'm not suggesting here that sea level and temperature is going to track up to that 412 parts per million along that line. But in the past, there has been a direct response, and we are observing that in the record. So sea level rise has accelerated through time. Global sea level rise has risen about 4 inches since 1993 using satellite altimetry records on the right. And so the black line on the right since 1993 is the Topex Poseidon, another collaborative, NASA and France and many other sensors are now used. But you can see the actual acceleration. So it's not just something that we predict will happen, it is happening. Sea level rise. When I first started working on this, Mark Schlefting here from the Times-Picayune will remember we were thinking 1.8 millimeters per year, my goodness, that's gonna drown Louisiana. We'll double that and double it again. And then you couple it with the local processes and it spells trouble for low-lying coastal marshes and delta regions like that in Louisiana. These vertical lines here, interestingly, IPCC notes that whenever there's a major eruption, there's a cooling period. And so all that's accounted for in these graphics that I'm going to show you of the changes that have been observed and projected into the future. But not all coastal landforms are equally vulnerable. That's a tide gauge record I downloaded last night from Pensacola, Florida, and then one from Grand Isle. And you can see the rate of sea level rise. It looks like at Grand Isle is, 4 times what it is in Pensacola and a lot higher than it is in Galveston, Texas. That's because the tide gauge is sinking. And on the left side of the slide here is a graphic that we produced for the Department of Transportation looking at areas that were vulnerable just to a 4 foot of sea level rise in coastal Louisiana. And when one part of a highway goes under, it's not usable in many cases, or long distances can be rendered unusable. So why do you see this high rate of sea level rise along the central Gulf Coast? Here's some examples of the oscillations and the natural explanations from scientists that have been collaborating and trying to understand these processes. But in the deltaic plain where you are sitting, these are some on the right that are most important. Storm surge, and I'm not going to talk about that. We have others, experts on that. But subsidence due to human development activities are parts of the causes of what you see here in Louisiana that makes it so vulnerable to storm surge. We have groundwater withdrawals, but once the city of New Orleans and the Jack's Brewery and others stopped withdrawing groundwater at high rates, it's stabilized. Hydrocarbon and brine production, this graphic here on the right just shows the induced faulting along these growth faults where we can detect subsurface fluid withdrawals from oil and gas fields. And the older the field is, the more brine it produces, the more volume of fluid comes out. Drainage of organic soils. You see these levees and these dredged canals all over the city, and when they were first built, people wanted them dry. This is right after the flood of 1927. They didn't want water in these canals. They needed them empty so they could drain them. Well, that accelerated it even further, the dewatering of those highly organic soils. Loading at the land surface. We didn't understand I've been doing this 50 years, working on coastal problems in Louisiana and Mississippi for 50 years, and people didn't understand the consequences of some of the development that was occurring from Mobile all the way down to Galveston. This dewatering and compaction of deltaic sediments is really important, and that sediment deprivation due to leveeing and the changing of the hydrology of the Mississippi River and its distributaries. On the left is a slide I took 15 years ago. There's hardly any marsh left there now. That's looking to the south to the Gulf of Mexico. And they don't build graveyards here in the water either. That's the consequence of this rapidly subsiding landscape. During Hurricane Katrina, you can see the landfall of Hurricane Katrina, that yellow line vertical there. And overnight during Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, Louisiana lost 217 square miles of its coastal marsh. Remember I mentioned the Chandeleur Island chain? So before Hurricane Katrina, the green basic island chain that Teddy Roosevelt visited years ago, storms might breach the island, but it would naturally fill in. But now, one of my colleagues, Abby Salinger, wrote about the tipping points that had been reached in the sustainability of the Chandeleur Islands, and hurricanes have this sort of a spin, and those islands protected the city of New Orleans and environments for many years. And there are also thresholds not just in environments, but in community sustainability that another one of our panelists will probably touch upon. You can see this Ile de Jean Charles tribe of the Chitimacha Indians, the ghost forest in the background there. The salinity increased so fast, it just turns to open water. And with that, I will stop and turn to our, oh, and there is a state master plan. I thought I had added a slide here that it's a $50 billion plan that will reverse some of these changes, and maybe we can talk about that during the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burkett. Next, I am pleased to introduce Dr. Tony Busalaki, who is the president of the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research. He has a PhD in oceanography and has expertise in Earth's climate system and ocean-atmosphere interactions, along with helping guide research and community support at the NSF National Center for Atmospheric Research and UCAR community programs. He has been involved in a wide variety of scientific and policy activities and received numerous awards, with highlights that include serving as chair and member of multiple National Academy of Sciences boards and committees, and being elected to the National Academy of Engineering. Welcome, Dr. Busalaki.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Anjali, for that moment of silence at the beginning. My wife and I live part of the year on the last block of Bourbon Street in a residential part of the French Quarter, just 10 blocks away from the terrorist attack. That morning, fateful morning, I got home around 1 o'clock after watching the fireworks on the river. We had the windows open that night. It was a mild evening, and several hours later, my phone started ringing off the hook from friends, family, colleagues asking how we were doing. New Orleans is still grieving. This is a city that's known for its revelry, but for the last 11 days, it's been one of reverence. Just Monday night, President Biden spoke from the pulpit at St. Louis Cathedral, and he said, and I quote, "New Orleans defines strength and resilience, be it Hurricane Katrina, the Deep Horizon explosion, or the disproportionate effects from COVID," topics we're probably going to cover this afternoon. So I just want to extend to you my personal thanks for your support and for being here this week. As Anjali said, the theme of this year's annual meeting is Towards a Thriving Planet, charting the course across scales. And when I give talks about the Earth as a coupled system or Earth system prediction, I start with this figure shown here. And at its core is this kernel of the physical climate system, with the atmosphere as the constituent fluid, coupling to the ocean, the land surface, and the cryosphere. And then how that physical climate system affects with the natural system, biology, chemistry, inclusive of marine and terrestrial ecosystems. And then finally, how that coupled physical natural system affects humanity and how humanity as well influences the coupled Earth system. Now, if we step down in scale from the global level, the Gulf of Mexico shown here really is a microcosm of the coupled Earth system. This is a perfect example of a region under the influence of multiple stressors across the physical, natural, and human coupled system. As shown here, the region is subject to the effects of the loop current in the Gulf, severe storms, oil spills, harmful algal blooms, coastal wetlands loss, nutrient loading from the Mississippi and Atchafalaya resulting in hypoxic dead zones, sea level rise from thermal expansion as well as subsidence, and coastal communities whose livelihood waxes and wanes with the cost of oil in the offshore oil industry. Now, if we look to the future, this is a region of anticipated growth in major metropolitan areas and the coastal zones. If we look at the example of the United States as a whole, something on the order of 40% of the U.S. population lives in coastal counties, and that's no different here. And so continued growth here is going to further expose human development to the weather, climate, and environmental risks shown here, even wildfires. 2023, we had some drought conditions here. We had marsh wildfires. The smoke from those wildfires combined with fog to produce some super fog events that had, severe impacts on the transportation sector here. Sea level rise, as Virginia just said. In this region here, sea level rise is higher than the national average. Over the past 30 years, about 9 inches of sea level rise here. Again, both due to thermal expansion and subsidence, as Virginia said, and is expected to rise by 14 to 18 inches over the next 30 years. And that's more than all sea level has risen over the past 100 years. Extremes, some projections suggest extreme precipitation amounts are going to increase in the southeast, and I think Marshall's going to say more about that. Anecdotally, my own experience here over the past 10 years, I know for a fact I've seen an increase in severe precipitation downbursts and more episodes of street flooding where we have to move our cars to the neutral ground. That then relates to inland flooding, where physical stressors such as increases in rainfall, temperature, sea level, in addition to increases in impervious surfaces and changes in land cover change, are going to exacerbate flood risks. High tide flooding events in the southeast are expected to increase by 5 to 10-fold over the next 25 years as a result of those changes. And then, of course, rapid intensification of hurricanes is expected to increase with a warming of the Gulf of Mexico. We've already seen several instances of hurricanes slowing down or stalling as they approach and get closer to the coast, inducing rainfall-related flooding. And yet we don't have a good understanding of what the impact of climate change is going to be on these stalling events towards the coast. And then that then segues to my last slide. This year, 2025, is the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. Those that know me and my car, the frame around the license plate of my car reads August 29, 2005, New Orleans, never forget. So I've organized this special session on Tuesday as a 20-year retrospective on Katrina, and I could not be more pleased with the high-powered speakers that accepted my invitation. Ms. Ashley Gardere is president of PolicyLink, a National Research and Action Institute advancing racial and economic equity. She served as senior advisor to Mayor Mitch Landrieu here in town, where she was the chief strategist of the mayor's economic opportunity strategy. Lieutenant General Russell Honore probably needs no introduction, best known for serving as the commander of Joint Task Force Katrina, responsible for coordinating military efforts here in the region. Decorated 37-year Army veteran, a global authority on leadership, disaster management, and climate preparedness. Allison Plyer is a chief demographer of the data center. Allison is recognized as an international expert in post-Katrina demographics and recovery from disaster trends. Professor Nancy Rabelais is professor and Shell-endowed chair in oceanography and wetland studies at LSU, a MacArthur Fellow who specializes in coastal change, eutrophication, and cumulative coastal stressors. And Mr. Mark Schlestein, who is here this afternoon. Mark retired after 40 years of writing and reporting on weather, climate, and the environment for the Times-Picayune. And for his reporting during and after Katrina, he and his colleagues received 2006 Pulitzer Prizes for public service and breaking news reporting. So this afternoon's discussion is just the beginning, and we're going to continue this in this room on Tuesday morning.
Thank you, Dr. Busalaki. Our third panelist is Dr. Marshall Shepard, who is the Georgia Athletic Association Distinguished Professor of Geography and Atmospheric Sciences at the University of Georgia. He received a PhD in physical meteorology, and his research expertise includes urban meteorology, extreme weather, and remote sensing. Among his many activities and awards, he is the host of the Weather Channel talk show Weather Geeks, an elected member of the National Academy of Sciences and National Academy of Engineering, and last but not least, a former president of the American Meteorological Society. Welcome, Dr. Shepard.
I think we have some weather dogs in here today. So I'm really pleased to be here. It's actually been a while since I've been able to get to an AMS annual meeting, so it just feels like home. So thank you for welcoming and thank you for putting together this great forum. I was just here 2 weeks ago. At the University of Georgia, we have a football team. It's a pretty good one, and it played in the Sugar Bowl. And we were here 2 blocks away from the devastating attack that occurred. And so as I think about the city of New Orleans and the resiliency of this city, from Hurricane Katrina that you just heard Tony mention, to Hurricane Ida, and now these senseless attacks, as I woke up that next morning, the city was still beating as I walked the block. So it's really an honor to be back here, and I hope to be back here in a few months for Dr. Wright's 10th anniversary HBCU Climate Change Conference as well. So maybe I should get a place here in New Orleans. But I want to start with this image that I chose, and I chose this image very deliberately because it represents the theme of this presidential forum. If you look carefully, it's a satellite image of Hurricane Ida. I spent the first 12 years of my career at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center thinking a lot about using satellites to observe weather and climate processes. If you know something about my career, I also study urban weather and climate, and so you see the lights at night representing urbanization within this image as well. But what you don't see, but it's implicit, is the socioeconomic vulnerability of the Black Belt, the vulnerability of infrastructure from the petrochemical industry in this region, and many other subtleties that are highlighted during extreme weather and climate events. And so I want to frame that discussion a bit here today. Now, on the right, that's me testifying before the House Science Committee, the U.S. Congress. And I want to pause because if you look a few seats down from me is Dr. Barry Moore, who we lost recently. Dr. Moore was a giant in this field, and I know I speak for many of you, he inspired us. And so I wanted to use that image to pay homage to Dr. Moore. Also, just over my shoulder is Dr. Tony Buslaki, who is actually sitting in that room representing UCAR. I really appreciated UCAR because they supported me quite a bit in that briefing. But what I told Congress that day is that extreme events are increasing. If you look at the scientific literature, various reports, the IPCC, the NCA, that's not an opinion statement I just made. It's what the literature and the science says. They're becoming more complex and they're compounded. And the Gulf region is particularly at risk. That brings me to a very important report, and I saw Dan Berger, I know he's here somewhere, who was our leader. I recently served on a Gulf research program of the National Academy study that produced this report, Compounding Disasters in Gulf Coast Communities, 2020 to 2021. Now, if you're not familiar with this report, it was just released last year. It is available on the National Academy's website, and I invite you to take a look at it. It's a robust report, as the Academy's reports tend to be, but there's some very useful information there. So in the next couple of minutes, I want to distill my perspective. I was sort of the weather climate expert on that particular study panel. But in the context of this discussion, I want to, I like to distill things down. And by the way, let me take an aside. If you are social media savvy, be sure you're using the AMS 2025 hashtag and share what you hear throughout this panel and throughout the meeting, because it's important that we engage here in our insular community, but this information needs to get out there. And so I want to challenge those, because I see some people in the audience that I know are very good in social media. So I challenge you all to make use of that hashtag, because I know many of our colleagues couldn't make it due to flights because of snow and freezing precipitation in the East Coast, and perhaps because of fires on the West Coast. But I want to posit we are a meteorology community, so I've got to show at least one equation. It's a simple one, not the quasi-geostrophic. Outdated benchmarks plus societal infrastructure plus emerging compound events equals the 5 R's. And I'll tell you what those 5 R's are. Now, Dan Berger's probably listening to me. He said, we didn't write anything about 5 R's in that report. But this is how I see it. I like to bring things into how I understand them. And so what are those 5 R's? And by the way, an example of a compound event, this is the frozen or winter storm event that happened. I think the Weather Channel refers to it as Uri. You see the power losses from satellite imagery in parts of Houston. That's an example of a compound event, and there were various compounding and cascading impacts of that event. So the 5 R's. One of the things that we found in that report is that compounding disasters introduce new interconnected and complex risk scenarios due to the increased potential of multiple overlapping hazards. Now that's important because it leads me to the next R, response. Increasing compound disaster risk requires communities to plan and prepare for the co-occurrence of multiple and very disruptive events that interact with societal exposure and vulnerabilities. That's important because oftentimes communities maybe are prepared for a hurricane, or maybe they're prepared for flooding or a heat wave. But what about all of them? Think about Hurricane Beryl last year, significant hurricane in its own right, but if you look at how many people died in that event, it was from the heat that followed. It was in the midst of a heat wave as well. Resilience. When a community increases its capacity to absorb the effects of hazards and minimizes its recovery needs, disaster effects are less likely to compound. So that's a challenge to communities, to think about and expand the way it plans for compound events. Remembering. How many of you, and I have family members that are guilty, they say, well, I'm not leaving. I lived through Hurricane X, and you replace the name with that storm. People have benchmark storms in their mind. Perception and understanding of risk are commonly grounded in past experiences, and that can lead to complacency in preparation and mitigation. The storms of today and tomorrow might not be that benchmark storm. So the benchmarks are flawed, but they shape how people respond. And then finally, recovery. Effective disaster recovery requires an epoch rather than event view that more fully captures the prolonged effects of compounding disasters and reflects the experienced reality of the community. And we distill this information from the literature, from studies, from actually going into Gulf communities all across this landscape to understand from emergency responders, community members, and policymakers what they experienced over that 2020 and 2021 period. So I look forward to Dr. Wright's remarks because she's just one of the national treasures in our discussion on environmental justice. And so I'm sure she'll round out this discussion in a way that makes this panel complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shepard. Finally, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Beverly Wright. She is a professor of sociology and founder and executive director of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. She is a scholar, author, and civic leader who was born and raised in New Orleans and has decades of experience in research and community organizing related to the effects of polluting industries in this region. Her numerous activities and awards related to addressing environmental and health inequities include being appointed by President Biden to the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Committee and receiving the EPA Environmental Justice Achievement Award. Welcome, Dr. Wright.
Good afternoon, and welcome to New Orleans. I am an 8th-generation person in the city of New Orleans, can trace my heritage back to free coloreds and slaves, and I'm a grandmother for the first time at 77 years old. I'm very excited. Yeah, some people don't like to tell their age. I love to tell my age. I'm so happy to be alive. I have to admit that Dr. Shepherd really set me up for this, because now I'm feeling the urge to really be dynamic, and I'm not sure I prepared myself for that. So I want to say that first of all. I'm not good without slides, and when I heard that I had 7 minutes alone, I was like, oh my God, what can I do in 7 minutes? Say I'm Dr. Beverly Wright most times. But I'm going to try to begin just a little bit, and I want to make this really, really personal. So in the city of New Orleans, I think Katrina was the event that made people really wake up to what is going on. Although environmental justice communities had been screaming about climate change coming, we called it climate justice in as early as 2002. We attended a conference in The Hague talking just about this. And it was because of the way that we saw climate change representing double jeopardy for poor communities, particularly those who live near or around petrochemical facilities in particular. So I live in Cancer Alley. That's an 85-mile stretch of land from New Orleans to Baton Rouge that when I started my work had 136 petrochemicals. It now has 156. We are moving backwards. And we had 6 refineries. And Cancer Alley is slated for 29 additional facilities, and can you guess where they want to put them? All of them are slated to go into communities where African Americans live. Even in the same parish, such as Ascension Parish, where they have 9 facilities being slated, all of them are going to Donaldsonville. And if you're from New Orleans, you know Donaldsonville, and you know who lives in Donaldsonville. So this climate change fight that we're in has placed vulnerable communities in a place that is even more vulnerable. And we also know that when political climates change, sometimes it's because of the effects of things like climate change, where people need to find someone to blame. It makes poor people even more vulnerable, and people of color, because of course, that's where the blame always goes. So I pulled a few slides just to remind people of what Katrina was, because that was the beginning. But of course, it's been almost 20 years, and you've seen this over and over again. So when Katrina happened, we thought, okay, this is it. You know, this won't happen again. This is the worst it can get. But we found out that that was just the beginning. It can get worse. And of course, for those of you who weren't here, this is what anticipating Katrina looked like, with thousands of people on the highway trying to get to safety at the last minute. You know, because in New Orleans, we are accustomed to hearing about hurricanes and that hurricanes are coming. We used to give hurricane parties. And when I was a kid, if a hurricane was coming, we filled the bathtub with water just in case, and we went to sleep. Mama said, okay, it'll be gone in the morning, it's coming tonight. So you take a city that is so accustomed to hurricanes coming, most times not reaching us, just the warnings of hurricanes. And then when they did come, we had some flooding, which is pretty common in New Orleans to see water in the street. But to have it 6 and 8 feet enter your house destroying everything was something we never, ever anticipated. And when that became real to us, it was almost too late for many of us. So what we always know is that, wealthier people will survive. If things are bad, it's always poorer people who fare out the worst. And oftentimes they don't survive. So that's a sociological phenomenon that I've been teaching about for years and years. Poor people always fare out worse than wealthier people when there are disasters. And this particular slide talks about, it's from a 2017 study about how the South, or poor people would fare worse off than others. Guess what? It's 2025. That literature has not changed. It remains the same. Even with an old slide, I can present it. There are other things that seem to happen, and they are predictable. That disaster actually widens the racial wealth gap. And I can speak personally from the city of New Orleans that had a very large Black or African American population. That population has diminished. But what has changed is that our city is whiter, but more than that, it's richer for white people. So we see a divide, a wealth divide, where Black people are getting poorer in the city and white people are getting richer. Something that was predictable, but I never thought it would happen in my city. And then disaster buyouts and resilience investments. Just to give you an example, most of these things benefit white people, especially affluent white people. So you can see FEMA generally will buy out communities, but it's mostly the wealthy communities of people with houses, now $500,000, $300,000. Those are the ones who get bought out. While, for example, a community like Agriculture Street Landfill, a case that I worked on for 30 years, was just bought out, last month? It's been a 30-year fight for us to get poor communities moved from a Superfund site, even after Katrina, where all of those chemicals would then, spread all over in the water. But for rich white people in particular, you notice I didn't say rich Black people. I didn't say rich Hispanics. I said rich white people. These are the people who fare out the better in our society. So managed retreat leaves the most vulnerable people behind. So, you have different things that occur. Let me give you an example. In the city of New Orleans, I think we had more housing projects per capita than any other city because Tulane University started a school of social work, and that was one of the things that they fought for, better housing for poor people. So our city had more than any place else. Well, when Katrina came, the decision was to get rid of all of the housing projects, made a brick and mortar that was standing strong after Katrina. So on the surface, it looked like the goal was to make better housing, safer housing for poor people. It wasn't. It was to displace Black people in this city, and in particular move Black people from the city. I said that already. But the thing was, you would think that they wouldn't say it out loud, but it showed up in the newspaper where, wow, well, Katrina did what we couldn't do, got rid of the housing projects. That was on the front page of the Times-Picayune, so nobody was pretending like the goal really was to get rid of poor Black people in the city of New Orleans. So when tourists came, it would be safer. When tourists came, it would look better. When tourists came, it would feel better. Nothing about, generations of African Americans who have been here for, like my family, 8 generations. And the Gulf Coast has and will continue to be the hardest, I'm over my time, sorry, hit from severe weather events due to climate change. So things have just not changed. So I wanted to just say this. I came with no slides initially and then realized I needed to have some, but I just would like to make this personal. As a grandmother for the first time, I think the thing that stays on my mind is how do we make things better for the next generation? I think I'm feeling more pressure for that than ever. How do you deal with misinformation, for example, about climate change? You know, how do you deal with people believing that a political party can actually send a hurricane to an area where the other party lives? How do you deal with that kind of, in terms of communication and social media? If we don't find better ways to communicate with society, we're in trouble. So I remember 7th grade civics class. I learned democracy requires an educated populace. Democracy requires an environmentally literate society for us to survive in our fight against climate change. Thank you.
So, thank you, Dr. Wright. Now we'll transition to the question and answer portion of our panel. And please continue to ask your questions on the Slido. If we could bring the Slido up. You can use the QR code to ask your questions on Slido and upvote the questions that you are interested in. So we'll start with some questions that we had for our panel prior to the panel starting. So we just heard from Dr. Wright about communication with society, about climate change, and the different challenges associated with that. And I wanted to ask this question first of Dr. Burkett, and then others can comment if you'd like, about the situation in the state of Louisiana and how the conversations are going here, and what is the state doing to mitigate the effects of climate change on coasts and hazards.
Okay. So the state of Louisiana has a state climate action plan with a net zero target by 2050. Very ambitious, and not much has happened since the plan was passed. But I love what you said about the educated populist. People have to understand. In Louisiana, people get it. In the state coastal master plan, the new plan that was approved unanimously by the legislature, 2023, $13 billion in coastal restoration. They don't talk about climate change, but they have a high scenario and a low scenario, and a sea level rise high, sea level rise low. You know, there are ways, people here, and you don't mess with that. You don't try to alter data. You don't, here in Louisiana, that is not tolerated. So I'd say that in general, the population here is very interested, very concerned, and very much engaged. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments from our panelists before we move to the next question?
Could you actually repeat we were having a little trouble down here hearing aspects of it.
Yeah, sorry. I was asking about what the state of Louisiana is doing to mitigate the effects of climate change on coasts and hazards, and what are the types of conversations people are having in the state of Louisiana.
So you're asking about Louisiana?
Yes.
Really? I wish I knew. I don't know what Louisiana is doing about communications. I can tell you what community-based organizations are trying to do. And there's a really outstanding organization in the city called STEM NOLA. It's relatively new. And I think that their approach is probably the best, is that you have to start with the children to really understanding. I really do believe that we've lost some generations. That's not going to happen. And, you know, as one teacher told me one time, oftentimes we're really sad about death, but death does move us out the way so young people with better ideas can move in. So all of your prejudices and stuff can die away with you. We know they don't all die. You know, at least 10% of it will be left behind, because memory, who remembers, you know? So, but with STEM NOLA, you know, he starts off really training young people in how the world works, and science, and you know, little things like when I was in school, I learned from the bear, don't start forest fires. And children, we learned that children stopped smoking, parents stopped smoking because the children learned that smoking was bad. And I would see kids say, "Mom, no, don't smoke." So if we start with the children, we may end up with a better world in the long run, because we've retrained society by really focusing on youth. Not to forget the rest of us. A lot of us, it's too late for us, but don't forget us anyway. We should keep keep talking. I also think that, you know, a person my age does not really understand social media and how it works. I don't understand that my children never watch regular television for nothing. Everything is on this, and some of it is really stupid, but they think it's real, you know? Some of it is really stupid. So finding a way to get them to discern between what is stupid and what is real becomes important as well. You know, if you say, you know there are fires in California, what? Oh, I didn't see that on whatever, because they're watching Beyonce's life and all these other people's lives and not paying attention to ours. So social media is something that we need to better understand, because that's where the young people are,
Yeah,
and learn to capture their attention in that way.
yeah.
Could I quickly follow up, just quickly, because this communication thing is something I'm very
about to ask you, so yeah, go
keen
ahead.
on, because our communication, our community's guilty. I'm going to drop that out there, boom. I often have people that say, I don't know how you engage beyond sort of the academic realm. We have no choice. I don't see hosting Weather Geeks or writing for Forbes or tweeting as extra stuff or outreach. I see it as fundamental to what we are doing, because there is direct misinformation and disinformation, particularly in our field. I mean, I don't know how many of my colleagues in the broadcast sector are here that were dealing with aggressive attacks during Hurricane Helene and Milton. People did not want to believe that we weren't controlling or making hurricanes. I actually did an interview on CNN where the actual CNN reporter had to ask me to dismiss that. And so I know in our PhD and master's programs and perhaps in undergrad, we learn how to write dissertations and theses. We learn how to go to conferences like this and present, write papers, go get grants. But we have to fundamentally change the way we sort of teach the next generation of scientists to not be fearful of that aspect of what we need to do as scholars. So.
Thank you. We have a number of questions here related to communication, and so you've articulated some of the issues so well. So I wanted to ask, if the panel will start with Dr. Busolaki, if you have thoughts about how do we educate the new generation on communication, and what are some of the ways that weather and climate scientists can communicate more effectively?
For me, I don't think it's any different than speaking on the Hill like Marshall showed. You have to make it relevant.
Yep.
And just as was being said, you know, so when the kids go home and tell their parents, and so, well, you know, what is the impact of the street flooding? What's the causal effects of that? And so to make it as relevant as possible.
Yeah, thank you. And we only have about 10 or 15 minutes left for our discussion, so we'll try to get through as many of these questions as possible, but yeah, if you can keep your answers brief, that would be great. So another question for Dr. Wright, which is, given the upcoming change in the U.S. government, what do you expect that will do to environmental justice and climate change work in the Gulf Coast?
Did she say to me?
Yes, so she said.
We can't hear you over here, I'm
sorry. She was saying during, with the
Sounds so loud to me.
Communication.
the political landscape, what do you think will happen in the environmental justice space going forward over the next several years?
Oh, okay. Okay, so with the political landscape changing, what will happen is that I think we will see a lot less funding resources available to work directly with environmental justice communities. On the other hand, nothing else will change. We've worked without money before, we'll continue working without money. We've worked through every presidential election, you know, it's been what? I was around for, going back as far as, well, before Nixon. You know, started working in this field in like 1987. So we've been around for every presidential change since then, and our work will continue exactly the same way. We'll have less money, I suspect, but we started with no money, so we'll continue fighting. In fact, this makes us fight harder, you know, to help protect communities and to preserve the little progress we've made.
Thank you. Okay, keep your questions coming, and you can upvote them so we can focus on the questions that most people are interested in. So another question that different people on the panel might address, but I'll start with Dr. Burkett is, have there been demographic shifts in the city after Katrina, and what have been the effects of that balance shift and the kind of work related to climate change that you do in the region?
Okay, I would really refer to Dr. Wright on the demographics of
Demographics.
New Orleans
Oh,
shift.
oh.
New Orleans. You've
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
alluded to it already a little bit, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I'm just hoping that we don't kill the goose that laid the golden egg. Because when you sort of disperse or get rid of our poorer population, that's where the culture of New Orleans actually comes from. Most people don't realize that, but it was born out of people who were in poverty. For instance, the Zulu parade, which is one of the biggest, most famous one now, was longshoremen who did it to mock King Rex, the white parade. That's why they wore blackface, to insult them. Most people don't know that real history. So this, and they came down the river on a barge and met with the King Rex, that's the white parade, as an insult. Now they greet, but times have changed. So if you keep destroying our community, you know, trying to pass ordinances where you can't play music past 7 o'clock because white people have moved from the suburbs and other places to the city. Now they want the city to be like the suburb. And so we play music all night. Young kids used to sit on the steps practicing. So that's different. But if you come in killing the thing that built this indigenous culture that we have, then the city can lose its soul. What we are finding is that the city has changed dramatically. So I grew up in the old 7th Ward, the 7th Ward, 6th Ward. 7th Ward was a free colored area. The 6th Ward was manumission, I think is what they called them. A lot of runaway slaves and people who are also, how can I say it, half Indian, you know, and runaway slaves, I think, was one of the biggest things because if they got to the 6th Ward, the police didn't go in, they were safe. So we have a really unusual history here, and the music that comes out of it comes out of our struggle and our survivor. The way we are resilient because we've had to be. Every time somebody say, oh, you're so resilient, yeah, I wish I didn't have to be, you know, but the only way I can stay alive is to be resilient, and we're about staying alive. And so the shift is, the gentrification has been at warp speed. The short-term rentals have taken up a lot of the housing for poor residents. The neighborhood that I grew up in, I had no idea that the majority of people were renting because they treated the houses like their own, and they went back 60, 70, 80 years in the same place. So at one time we were considered the oldest sort of European city because most people here were from here for generations, as I am. We're losing that. And so people from the 6th Ward, 7th Ward, all of that 9th Ward are all being pushed to New Orleans East, which for us was like George Jefferson. You know, it's moving on up. If you got out of the city to New Orleans East, you were in the place in the sky. It was all the big, beautiful brick homes and beautiful streets with, you know, lawns and all of that kind of stuff. So that's been destroyed as well with gentrification and the way they pushed poor people out into an area where you need a car. And so they're walking with not good bus service. So when you hear that New Orleans is a utopia, the best example of survival after a storm, it is true for white people. It's absolutely true for white people, but it is not for black people or people who look like me or people who have been here for generations. It has changed dramatically, and it has not been for the good. Even our public school system that went to all charter. All charter, what that meant was that communities no longer have any control over their school system, and the person you elect to represent you is no longer the person in charge. So there's a lot of ways to look at success, you know, recovery. I don't want to be here too long, so I'm going to stop here, but it's a long story, And it's not the story that you hear for Black people. It's very different.
Thank you. There's many great questions on here. One, I'm not sure if Dr. Busalaki or someone else has comments on this, but we've been talking a lot about improving hurricane and flood resilience and the impacts of those, but what do the impacts of heat potentially look like on the Gulf Coast? And are there actions being taken to mitigate? You can't hear me. Heat.
What impact of
Impacts
heat
of
on the
heat,
Gulf Coast?
heat resilience.
We've heard a lot about flood, but what about heat?
So I'm going to take it as a slightly different approach. You have to look at the built environment, and as well as, I mean, it's just heat, it's flooding, it's wind, and so it clearly is a region that is in need of taking a hard look at its built environment. If you look at the insurance sector, insurance industry has estimated that on an annual basis, there's $2.5 billion worth of annual risk in the state of Louisiana, and that's the largest in the country based on the cost of the standing stock. And so that gets to not just heat, but heat, wind, rain, and there's severe needs for hardening of that sort of infrastructure. But where are those funds going to come from? That's the challenge.
Could I just kind of pin to that? So heat, as we know, or extreme temperatures is often the deadliest aspect of fatalities from weather. But you think about the southern tier, the U.S. South, many jobs in agriculture and construction and other sort of outside work will be in jeopardy as OSHA standards and other types of wet bulb globe temperature standards are used to determine work hours, for example. And that gets back to vulnerability and who has these types of jobs that are very critical to our economy but may be vulnerable. So I think there are studies that are forthcoming. Look, I mean, we all know this literature, so it's not something we have to kind of focus on, but it's just a matter of now thinking about the sort of, as I talk about, the compoundedness and the ways that we develop resiliency to heat.
I would like to comment. I think that one of the things that we have to do differently as we must transition to a renewable economy is to think about transitioning to an equitable renewable economy. That means retraining of our society in general. The fight we have now with workers who need to transition, from the old manufacturing ways to new manufacturing ways, with things moving towards electrification, all of these things require a different educational system for the populace. And this is where the federal government should be. This is where the federal government should be doing this kind of planning. So you ever ask yourself, why is it that our bridges are falling down and you go to Europe and the bridges are 100, 200 years old, Why is it that in New Orleans we have the sewage and water board, not being maintained properly with water flowing everywhere? I got a $900 water bill. Things happening. Well, if there's no planning for maintenance, and that always concerned me, how is it that a country this smart would not have a maintenance plan for bridges, for sewer systems, for, we're changing out all of the lead lines to the cities because we know it's causing lead in all of our water. So we have to do something different. And it's going to require transition to renewable energy, but it's going to require that transition being that we take the populace along with us through a new educational system, a new focus, and not leaving people behind, and what we call in the movement a just transition to a renewable economy.
Yeah, thanks so much for all of your comments. We're getting close to end of time, so I have just one last question that I will ask Dr. Burkett. Is, given the intensifying frequency and magnitude of extreme events and the different kinds of things we've talked about today, in your role, what kind of approaches and science and technologies and decision support tools do you see that are most useful for addressing these problems, or most important? I know, big question.
Big question. Relying on the integrated Earth system modeling and having a better understanding, just the And the wealth of knowledge that's in this region, of the University of New Orleans, LSU, and Tulane, the science, you know, allowing these scientists to collaborate to develop tools that will inform planning, whether it's heat resilience and or the construction of roads, you know, integrating science with policy, I think, is the challenge. And I think that Louisiana's doing a pretty good job of that, actually, looking at the most recent master plan. So.
Okay. Yes, thanks so much. And we have a number of other questions that are very interesting. And as Anjali and Tony mentioned, we'll continue to have presidential sessions and other sessions on related topics throughout the week. So I hope that you can feel free to speak with the panelists and follow up in later panels. So I'd like to thank our panel for their fascinating insights and discussion. And I hope everyone enjoyed today's panel and learned as much as I did. And next, I'm going to pass it over to Anjali for a few closing remarks.
Wow, I'm still trying to take in all that I heard from all the four panelists. Dr. Wright, thank you so much for sharing your precious insights. You really, we're all here in New Orleans, and understanding the region is a special thing when we come to the meeting. So thank you for doing that. Dr. Shepard, you told us about the need to have effective communication. Tony, Dr. Pusalaki, sorry. Dr. Pusalaki, the Earth system coupled and the need for having robust coupled system information coming out of that for decision making. And Virginia, Dr. Burkett, wow, I really like the long-term view so that we can see the current changes in the perspective of the long-term, natural forcing of the system, orbital forcing. And Rebecca, thank you for moderating. So I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Let's thank our panelists once again. And with this, we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll move on to the annual business meeting. So thank you.
Please take your seats. The annual meeting welcome and annual review will begin in 3 minutes.
Jen, please start. It's like a couple minutes more. Yeah. Yes, if everyone could please take their seats, we'll be starting in a couple of minutes. Todd? Do we have a quorum? Looks more than 50 to me. Yes, yes, I have. Yeah. Okay, I see it's 5:28, so I think we can start. Let's transition now into the annual review and the formal AMS business meeting. So we have confirmed that we have a quorum of more than 50 people, voting members rather, so we may continue. So as I mentioned earlier in the presidential session forum, the theme of the 105th annual meeting is Towards a Thriving Planet, Charting the Course Across Scales. And the goals of this meeting are to assess how the state of science, practice, and art can be brought to bear on addressing challenges ahead of us, and to identify remaining challenges that need to be resolved in the journey to achieve resilience in communities and a thriving planet. So the annual meeting is an opportunity for academia, government, and the private sector to share and address challenges, integrating research and societal decision-making through collaboration. The training and development of the next generation workforce for the enterprise is also given due attention during our meeting. I think I need the next slide, I guess. Yes, so I have to take a moment to thank the annual meeting program committee. The co-chairs were Pat Haar, Jin Huang, and Rebecca Morse. And then I have listed here Doug Hildebrand, Charles Jackson, Renu Joseph, Barry Kime, Yaitza Luna Cruz, Brian Norcross, Ali Omar, Melissa Piper from the Student Conference, Jason Samanau, Ashish Sharma, Gyami Shrestha, and Castle Williamsburg. I truly couldn't have pulled it off without them and the wonderful support that we received from Jen Ives, Director Meetings, and her team. Jen, the other Jen, Jen, and everybody else. Yeah, the next one. Next slide, please. And we also had a local organizing committee, which was chaired by Barry Kime and Rebecca Morse. And here are the names. Dan Berger from the Academy. He's the person who helped us a lot to recruit the panelists for the presidential session. Michael Feldman, Doug Hildebrand, Jake Lambert, Daniel Manning, Carlos Martinez, Paul Miller, Lauren Nash, Stacy Porter, John Bunsolo, Jen Sprague, Jill Trepanier, Susan Van Kooten, and Jacob Zering. I hope I got their names pronounced right. Forgive me if I didn't. Next one. And there's the program chairs. I'm not going to read. It's an exhaustive list. But everybody who helped with organizing the sessions, conferences, are listed here. Thank you very much. We really can't do it without the volunteers and the AMS staff, meticulous planning throughout the course of the year, meeting the deadlines, planning the sessions. We had a total of, 45 conferences and symposia. Next slide. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the newly elected governance. So as we had our elections, and back in, I think, late fall, the president-elect, he's here, Alan Seals, if you would just stand up. Thank you. Congratulations. And councillors Steve Burnett, Daniel Breezy, Jenny Frankel-Reed, Stephanie Herring, John Lanici, Russ Schumacher, some of them are here, I know I saw them. Congratulations, and we all look forward to working with you. And the Culture and Inclusion Cabinet Chair, Mona Behel, commissioners, Stephen Beda III and Walter Robinson. And the secretary, we actually had the AMS secretary-treasurer position split into AMS secretary and AMS treasurer. And the AMS secretary is Todd Glickman. Welcome back home, Todd. Todd used to work before, a long time back, at AMS headquarters, so we're glad he's back. And the treasurer, Richard Spalding, I believe he's not in person here. He's going to come tomorrow. And the executive committee, we have new members on the executive committee, Bill Kuo and Alan Seals. Next slide. Thank you to our outgoing president, councillors, commissioners, and secretary-treasurer. Past President Rich Clark rotates out of the EC, and the council and councillors Mona Behel, Candice Boyd, Rachel Hauser, Bernadette Wooden-Plackey. We couldn't have done it without the insights and all the stakeholder interactions that you bring to the meetings of council. Commissioners Ankur Desai and Kevin Gobert also rotating off, and Secretary-Treasurer Bruce Telfian. Bruce actually kept me in place. You know, I'm not good on parliamentarian procedures, as you saw last year when I was trying to close the meeting. So yeah, Bruce and Todd will kept us in check. And so thank you, Bruce. I don't know whether he's here in the audience. Maybe not. Yeah. Next slide. At this moment, I would like to have a moment of silence for all the deceased members of the American Meteorological Society. And I'd also ask you to keep in your thoughts all the victims of the New Orleans New Year's Day attack. So let's take a moment of silence. Thank you. Next slide, please. So we'll hear from the commissioners. They will each give a brief report. And I believe Tony Broccoli's report is via video, so we'll have that first. And then we have, the order is here, Erica Grochet, Christy Franz, Kevin Clausen, so on. All the commissioners will come to stage and give their reports.
Hello, my name is Tony Broccoli and I'm the AMS Publications Commissioner. I'd like to give you an update on the activities of the Commission during the past year. Preliminary data indicate that AMS journals received 2,754 submissions last year, a very small decrease of just over 1% from 2023. This small decrease is a marked change from the much larger decreases experienced during the previous 3 years. Submissions to our newest journal, Artificial Intelligence for the Earth Systems, increased by more than 10%, and several other journals experienced similar increases. Time to initial decision went up this year because of some unexpected staffing shortages. I apologize to our authors for the unfortunate delays they have experienced. Thanks to an overall increase in investment in the publications program, the shortage has been addressed and the situation is improving. The Publications Commission has had numerous discussions about better ways to serve the needs of our authors. Although no specific recommendation has emerged thus far, there may be additional developments during the coming year. I'd like to close by thanking everyone involved in AMS Publications for their efforts during the past year, including the professional staff at AMS and the volunteer reviewers, editors, chief editors, and at-large Publications Commission members who devote their time for the benefit of the community. This marks the end of my 6-year tenure leading the Commission and the beginning of the term of my very capable successor, Walt Robinson of North Carolina State University, former chief editor of the Journal of the Atmospheric Sciences. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Erica Groche, Commissioner on Professional Affairs. And 2024 was a very active year for the Professional Affairs Commission as we added an entire new board to the Commission and successfully executed improvements to others. We're also getting ready to celebrate a big milestone. So here are the details. The Certified Digital Meteorologist Program just completed its first full year, and the Board on Digital Meteorology had a successful first year under the leadership of Vanessa Alonso, who is also the chair of the Broadcast Board. So she had a lot going on this year. We are now up to 21 CDM seals approved. 70 people are currently active in the application portal, so this is going very well for us. Now, the Broadcast Board just issued CBM Seal 993, and that means we're on the verge of issuing our 1,000th seal. A social media campaign to accompany the occasion is being planned. The 2025 AMS Broadcast Conference has a new name, the Broadcast and Digital Meteorology Conference, to reflect the inclusion of modern media and the CDM program into our society. The conference this year will be co-located with the Mesoscale Conference in Boise from June 24th to 26th. The location itself lends well to a focus on fire weather and space weather, both of which will be featured as standalone sessions. The Board on Best Practices was hard at work this year reviewing the current slate of statements and identifying those that need a refresh. And the Board is helping to develop a new AMS Statements Committee with the goal of streamlining the process to better apply the breadth and depth of expertise within the society to our best practices. Finally, the Early Career Leadership Academy Planning Committee is ready to accept applications for the 2025 class, and membership for the selection committee is being assembled. So my call of action to all of you in this room, if you are within 10 years of your most recent degree, or you know someone who would be a terrific ECLA participant, please encourage them to apply. The Certified Consulting Meteorologist Board evaluated 13 candidates in 2024, and 8 were granted the seal, while 5 were encouraged to apply once again in a year's time. So that's an update to the CCM program. You no longer have to wait 2 years after a failed attempt at earning that certification. Other boards and committees within the Professional Affairs Commission, just so you know, include the Board on Continuing Professional Development, the Board for Operational Government Meteorologists, the Board for Private Sector Meteorologists, and the Board on Student Affairs. Thank you very much, and now I will turn it over to Christy Frantz, the STAC Commissioner.
Good evening. I am Christy Frantz, current Commissioner of STAC. So at this meeting, we will transition STAC leadership. There are 3 commissioners, incoming, current, and outgoing, and a couple of them were already mentioned, but I'll just go through that again. So Ankur Desai is rotating off as STAC Commissioner, and I will rotate into the outgoing STAC Commissioner role. I've already thanked Ankur twice today, and I know he's not here, so I don't feel overly compelled to say too much more, but he has done a lot of great service over the last 6 years, a lot of great work for STAC and for AMS, so I greatly appreciate that. Clark Evans will be stepping into the current STAC Commissioner role, and Stefan Bita will be joining us as the incoming Commissioner. Stefan served as on the Committee of Weather and Analysis and Forecasting for 5 years and has chaired that for the last 2 years, and we're really excited to have him join us. So if you don't know, STAC consists of 30 science committees and 6 interdisciplinary boards. Current membership for STAC across these boards and committees is 456 volunteer members. This represents over 1/3 of all AMS volunteers. And these boards and committees work very hard throughout the year to carry out STAC activities and to support their scientific communities. One of the primary roles of STAC is planning conferences and symposia. STAC boards and committees led or collaborated on 35 conferences or symposia at the 2024 annual meeting and held 5 specialty meetings at various locations and times throughout 2024. And a similar number is occurring in 2025. So they are very, very active group. In addition, every year, each STAC board or committee can select a recipient of a STAC award in the area of early career accomplishments, distinguished accomplishments in research, or outstanding service. This is the 7th year we have been issuing STAC level awards, and there are 19 people being recognized this year. It's a similar number to last year. Of special note, this will be the first year for the AMS Award for Outstanding Contributions to Boundary Layer Meteorology, and it will be given at this meeting. Credit for this new award goes to the STAC committees on boundary layers and turbulence, air-sea interaction, and polar meteorology and oceanography, who collaborated to propose this award and get it approved. To conclude, a very big thank you to all STAC members, and in particular the chairs and vice chairs who help lead all these important activities for AMS. On a final note, if you're interested in participating in STAC, you can reach out to the leadership of individual boards or committees, or submit your interest through the AMS volunteer portal. And if we have any students in the audience, I know that there's a great interest in getting more and more students involved in STAC, so feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Hey everybody, we're in New Orleans. Who's excited? Yes. All right, I'm already going to start giving AMS real-time feedback. What do y'all think? Next year, should we walk on stage to a song? Yeah, sounds good. So I'm Heidi Santola, and I'm the current commissioner of the Weather, Water, Climate Enterprise. And I like to start many of my presentations, whether it's my work of the day or here what I do at AMS, with gratitude. I have so much gratitude for being a part of this commission. I can't even tell you the amazing friends that I've made, being a committee chair or a board chair, or hearing it just amazes me. And some of the highlights I wanted to highlight is we had an amazing Washington Forum last year in DC. As some of you may know, we were born of the Fair Weather Report of 2003. And part of our mission and directive is to collaborate across all the sectors of government, public sector, academia, and private sector. And interacting with the policymakers has been like a tremendous experience for me and everybody I've worked with. We also did an amazing summer community meeting in August. And this year, we're going to actually be combining forces with the Washington Forum and summer community. So it's like a super powerhouse at the end of May. I encourage you all to sign up for that. I also want to alert you that we've done some extensive research of evolving from 2003. We started an enterprise study last year, and we're going to do some continuation this year. And there's a town hall tomorrow around Tuesday at noon, actually. And there's also, believe it or not, 16th Energy. So the energy new economy has been around 16 years, been amazing. It's always packed rooms, so get there early if you're going to attend that. We also have some amazing joint sessions with CWCE and artificial intelligence and what have you. And also we have our Client Link Economics Forum. And then my call to action is come join the fun in this commission. If you're interested in being a member, a board chair, a committee chair, doesn't matter if you're a student, early career, or even if you're retired, we want you on this commission. So come join the fun. Thank you. Oh, over to my friend.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, you weren't supposed to do that so fast, right? Sorry about that. I'm excited. Kevin Clazel, I am the Commissioner for Education and Engagement. And if you are involved in any of the education or engagement boards and committees, wave your arms wildly at this time. All right, so those are the people that you want to make sure you meet and see during the course of this meeting. We have a robust set of 175 volunteers in our commission, and the work that continues seems to, I don't know why it's so few people, because the work is immense. As you can imagine, all of our boards involved on the education and engagement side, including the higher education board that's led by Wendy Flynn. That higher education board is not just working within the realms of AMS. They are reaching out to places like AGU and the physics groups and UCAR and involved in the heads and chairs meetings. They're doing something almost every month of the year to help our students and our early career folks through partnerships with our professional affairs people to have a better society going forward. And what that means is that we've got sort of tentacles in everything from undergraduate statements to new statements that are going to be coming out on how to succeed in the sort of the private sector for our students. We certified 8 more teachers this year. We had the opportunity to have Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts this morning on site. So the work that's being done in addition on the diversity side, the Braid folks, Cosmos, Coriolis, not only are they involved in this particular meeting, and I invite you to attend their receptions, but now they're populating the specialty meetings throughout the year at AMS with these similar opportunities to network, to promote diversity within the society. So I would like to challenge you. We also have 7 awards that we give, and I invite you to go out there and read every citation that's out there in the foyer, because you have a challenge today. Because you walked in here, you are in the business meeting, you have a homework assignment, right? This is the Education and Engagement Commission. You're gonna get a homework assignment. And that homework assignment is every single person in here within the next 4 months needs to nominate someone for an AMS award. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm not going to give you guys a homework assignment, so just laud me with praise. I represent the Planning Commission, which is a newer commission in its functions. So for those who aren't as familiar, we provide strategic direction, especially for the council, on matters, especially pertaining to things like AMS governance, things that really take time to develop and cultivate within the society, but which are so essential to promoting the organizational health of the AMS. So I'm happy to report, last year I stood at this podium and spoke with you all about the importance of overhauling our Constitution. We had a really wonderful team assembled that looked at this document that for the most part had language that spanned back 50 years. And it even included things like gendered language, assuming all of our leadership would be men. And we looked at it with an eye to both making it more of an equitable document, but also looking at ways that we could set our society up for better positioning ourselves to be able to adapt to change, make certain sections evergreen. And I'm very pleased to say that that did pass through the membership this year. So we have a modern Constitution. Big applause to all of you. Thank you so much for supporting this. So alongside that, now the council is undertaking efforts to modernize the bylaws in accordance with the things that need to change because of those constitutional changes. So after that, something that the council has been undertaking this year and that the Planning Commission has really been trying to absorb and pull along is an effort to push further into our strategy and think about what our mission and vision are. You might be familiar with the AMS grounding documents, maybe not, but if you look, you'll see that there's kind of a mission. We don't really have a well-articulated vision. This is something that, if you've ever tried to serve in the council, is a material concern when you have the responsibility to manage the budget of the AMS and decide what are our priorities. And we don't really have very clearly delineated, articulated priorities. We have a very large set of things that we say matter, and that isn't enough for managing an organization like ours, especially through this time of enormous societal change and budgetary change. So we have been working with the council to think about strategies for addressing this and making our mission and vision much more focused, more clear, and helping our council to make the decisions that they need to make in those roles. So that's something that through this year, we're going to be putting through to council some suggestions for implementing those changes. Finally, I want to mention that we are, in the Planning Commission, going to be taking in a number of new members this year. We have a number of at-large positions that are coming open. So if you are interested in being part of this great group, we have all of the commissioners that serve on this, the immediate past president, the CIC chair, and we have wonderful conversations about just this. How do we help to take care of the AMS and its very foundations? If you are interested in being a part of this great group,
please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I was looking for this. Yeah, so next slide, please. Okay, that's my reflections. Yeah, that's the slide I want. So I wanted to tell you a bit more about the meeting. We have over 7,000 registered attendees at this meeting. Attendees representing 57 countries. The meeting features 2,887 oral presentations, 1,523 posters, and over 100 exhibitors. So I think we've done good, yeah. Thank you to everyone, once again, who contributed towards the development of this meeting. And I also want to acknowledge the generous sponsors, Lockheed Martin and Peraton. We have two named symposium at this meeting, Heather Lazarus Symposium, honoring the late Heather Lazarus, and the Jerry Meal Symposium. And I'm just so happy that we're doing this symposium under my watch. Jerry's I've known Jerry, a close friend and colleague for several decades. So I want to just reiterate that AMS is a volunteer-driven organization. And the AMS staff, I said earlier, they do an amazing job of providing support to the council, executive committee, and the various commissions. It has been an eventful year. We did several agenda items were crossed off the list, at least in terms of completion. One of them was the Code of Ethics. It was developed and it's now online and operational, thanks to Fred Carr and Mary Glacken, both past presidents, and the rest of the team members for shepherding this process. We also completed an equity assessment, and we are in the process of examining all the recommendations of that assessment. And then we also worked with community action partners at Harvard, from Harvard, which is a nonprofit they did volunteering work for us. They worked with us to identify opportunities and challenges, so we're going to take a look, and as Kim mentioned, we're going to incorporate all this that we've done the last year and the years before that into our future planning. And I also want to mention that as of January 2025, so just like a week or so ago, Brian Papa is the acting executive director for the AMS. We are in the process of initiating a search for the next executive director for the AMS, and we'll keep you posted on when we need your input and feedback at various stages of the process. And now, it's my distinct honor to welcome David Sensrud, the new president for 2025. Yeah.
All right, well, good afternoon. So I want to begin by thanking Anjali for her outstanding leadership as AMS president. Yeah. Bring it. So working with Anjali has been like taking a master class in leadership. So she works to engage everyone. She's very strategic in her thinking. She is a great listener, and she is driven to do what is right for AMS. So it has been a tremendous honor to serve with her, and AMS is very lucky and fortunate to have her advice and assistance continue over the next 2 years as she transitions to AMS past president. And I'm also very unfortunate to have that as well. So let's see here. Anjali. Here is a small gift as a token of our appreciation for all your efforts. So please join me in thanking Anjali for the many ways she advanced the AMS mission over this past year.
Continue to support. I love the passion.
All right. Sure, you may leave, yes. All right, so I was asked to outline a few goals for the coming year from my personal perspective. So actually, this is a theme. So one goal is to express gratitude, to show my support for and appreciation for AMS staff, volunteers, and members. So I personally believe that our profession and our community are better because of AMS. AMS brings us together, like it's happening this week, and provides us with neutral ground to find new ways to work together. For this to work, of course, having talented AMS staff, dedicated volunteers, and a strong membership is crucial. So right now, I would ask if AMS staff members would please stand. So if you're AMS staff, if you would stand, turn towards the audience, wave, let's give them a round of applause. So yesterday I attended the student conference and learned a few things and decided to use one of their opening activities here tonight, so bear with me. So if you are a current member of an AMS committee or board, please stand and remain standing. So come on, stand up, stand up. So, okay. Now if you have served AMS in the past on a board or committee, please stand and then remain standing. Okay. So, as you can see, there are opportunities to become involved with AMS if you would like to. And of course, this involvement is going to ebb and flow over time. But for all you early career and students, there are chances here that you could become involved. And so let's build on this. So if you have volunteered for AMS in some way, member of a panel discussion, a session chair, if you've done manuscript reviews, answered surveys, if you're presenting at this meeting or are attending the business meeting right here because you are interested in AMS, please stand. So this should be basically everybody, right? And AMS staff, please also stand. So look around you. Take a look who's ever next to you and who's behind you. This is our community, right? These are the people who are going to make AMS work and continue to make it work out throughout the years to come. And so I'm going to ask actually to say hello to those who are around you. So we're going to take a minute or two and just say hello to the person on either side of you and in front of you and behind you. So go ahead, come on. All right, so this is what community looks like, right? We get together, we talk to each other, we have fun, and of course we learn. So thank you for doing that. That was fun. So another goal for me is, of course, to work with council and our staff, AMS staff, to keep AMS moving forward, making targeted investments in some key activities, which includes publications and growing our membership. Now, as Anjali mentioned, identifying the next executive director is definitely a goal for this year. So I'll be supporting the search process and working with council and the search committee. It would be awesome if this person could be selected and actually attend the 106th AMS annual meeting in Houston, but of course no promises, because the most important thing is to identify a great executive director for AMS. So on the national scene, I suspect the word for the year will be disruption. So what this means for nonprofits like AMS and for our own communities, the government, private sector, and academia, is unknown. I mean, we spent decades building this community and finding ways to work together effectively across sectors, and we need to loudly share this message of success. Effective communication, which was mentioned earlier, likely will be very important as we tell our stories to illuminate the best path forward, and then as we navigate any changes that come. Last, holding a great 106th annual meeting in Houston next year is the goal. Now, some of you might be wondering about the meeting theme, It might be showing up shortly. Deciding upon a theme took some time, as AMS has been on a roll with great meeting themes over the years. When you look back, it's really amazing what we've had for meeting themes. And so I considered numerous themes and then rejected them one by one. Yes. I started to panic, well, at least break a sweat. I was starting to get a little bit worried. And so then I thought about a question. What have I learned in the past decade that has had the greatest impact on my life? And this was actually a question I could answer. So it ended up, what I learned was actually from a book I purchased in the bookstore in the Chicago O'Hare Airport. I love going into airports when you have time, and then I always pop into a bookstore and I just browse. So the book is Thinking Fast and Slow by Nobel Prize winner and psychologist Daniel Kahneman. In the book, he writes about the two systems that dominate how we think. So the fast, intuitive, and emotional system one, of course, this is a scientist talking, we have numbers in it, and the slower, deliberate, and logical system two. So we do most of our thinking using the fast approach, as it takes less mental energy and is thus our default. Yet engaging in our slow thinking can be incredibly important. So which system we use to make decisions at home, in our jobs, and across all aspects of life is important, and I found this perspective and knowledge to be very helpful for me. I now stop myself when I start thinking using the fast approach for a decision that really deserves slow thinking. Not all the time, mind you, because our tendency is still to use the fast system, but this happens much more than it did in the past. So I want to introduce these concepts throughout the meeting next year and give this meeting a bit more of a professional development flavor. So the theme title is Fast and Slow Thinking, the Human Factor in a Rapidly Changing World. Now, I've used professional development very broadly. Not only does professional development mean improving knowledge and skills in our field, but knowledge that is useful in life. So understanding how best to care for our mental health is an essential skill for everyone, and my hope is that the Houston meeting will include more content to help us learn about mental health and perhaps become more resilient during our life journeys. So those are the plans for next year. We'll see how we do. As we come to a close here, I believe we have to have a motion from Todd Glickman to bring things to a close. So Todd, you are on.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the acts of the counselors and officers of the Society during the year ended December 31st, 2024, done in the proper conduct of the business of the Society, be hereby adopted, approved, and confirmed.
Seconded. Okay, do I hear a second? I've already heard a second. So all those who approve, please say aye. Aye. Do we have any nays? Say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing that, the motion is approved. So thank you for being here. We have a great week ahead of us, a tremendous annual meeting theme, lots of great sessions, as you've already heard some of the details. Please go out and engage, have conversations with the people you meet. Turn this into a really tremendous annual meeting, better than all the rest. That's always the case, is every meeting needs to get better and better. That's the hope as we build our community, enjoy being with friends from you've known over time, and make a few new friends. So I think we are adjourned for the day. Have a great week. Thank you very much.